share it. So when, like, we're trusting for a new building, and I've seen a lot of times in my life where people were trusting God for finances or other things, and it seems like it's very frequent that it comes down to the very end. And just an illustration of that I remembered was, so in Genesis, God tells Abraham to go and sacrifice his son. And so we know the ending of the story that he doesn't. God provides a sheep at the very end. But if you think about that story, it might have been, easier for Abraham if after he committed and started going, that right away God told him it wasn't going to happen. I don't know why, but for some reason God didn't. If you remember the story, Abraham was literally raising his knife to kill Isaac before God stopped him. So just in hoping, for our new building, I'm also praying that we'll find out before next week where we're going. But I'll still have that. Yep. But I'll have that faith even as if we're loading a U-Haul and still don't know where we're going. I still would have faith that God will tell us where to go once we actually start driving it. Like, God will wait till the very last minute sometimes, like he did with Abraham and Isaac. So have faith until the very end. And then still have faith even after the end. But have faith till the end. So, good morning. Thanks for coming back from the break. Obviously, next week is Thanksgiving, and I know it can be a very busy time, so I do appreciate you making the time to be here. A few weeks ago, Pastor Fred asked me if I'd like to give a Thanksgiving sermon. When he asked me that, if he asked me if I wanted to preach, I was surprised that I suddenly sort of felt an instant desire to say no. My thought was like, no, not a Thanksgiving sermon, not me. Usually my only concern about preaching is finding time to prepare and practice a sermon. But for some reason, that wasn't the feeling I had this time. I just had this sort of instant feeling of dread or fear. Not a really powerful or overwhelming feeling at all, just a slight poke of an emotion. But it was just enough to make me want to say no. And it was also enough for me to realize that there was something there. I've done enough with addiction and trauma counseling to realize two things from that. The first is that even though it was a small feeling, it's still a legitimate feeling that's showing me something in my life. And the second thing I realized is that because of that feeling, it meant that it was actually more important that I do a sermon on thankfulness, because there was some small past hurt or trauma, however small, in my life that would make me want to say no. So facing that and doing the sermon would be part of the healing process. So here we are. So to begin to understand why I felt this way about Thanksgiving, we're going to imagine a situation. I know there's a few people like me, and Tim Murray was not here, but there's a condition called aphantasia that we both have, which makes it really difficult to picture things in your head. But for those of you who can picture things in your head, imagine it's like the classic Thanksgiving scene. You're seated around a table full of family or friends or whoever that is, and someone says, let's all go around the table and say something we're thankful for. People start saying things they're thankful for, and your turn is quickly approaching. All eyes are on you. People are waiting for your answer. What emotion are you feeling right now? I don't think I'm the only one in that situation who's ever felt stressed or anxious. I know there are other people here who know what I'm talking about. You're on the spot to give an answer. Hopefully no one is expecting anything really profound, but other people have already given really good answers. Somebody already gave a joke answer that they're thankful that Uncle Steve had to work, so he didn't help with the cooking, so people laughed, but that means joke answers are out. And other people already said, the classic answers of family and time together and those things. So you don't want to come across as feeling or as being unthankful or boring or shallow, so you're wanting to give a good answer. Like I said, other people gave good answers already. Somebody else would have just given an answer, I'm sure, that's that really big thing you want in your life, whether that's, retirement or the thing they're thankful for their new marriage or saying they're thankful for their year free of smoking, whatever that big life goal you have, for sure somebody's going to say they're thankful for that exact thing, which will unintentionally remind you that you're sad that you're not there yet in your life. And you'll know you should just feel happy for that person, and you probably do feel happy for them, but you still feel a little bit sad that you're not there. And now you're also feeling guilty for feeling sad. So now you're anxious because you're about to give an answer. You're sad because you don't have that thing. You feel guilty because you're feeling sad. Anyone else relate to those, or is it just me? The The people relating to that are probably our socially anxious people. And even if you haven't felt that way before, this is an opportunity to try and use what we're learning in our empathy class on Sundays and expand your perspectives and start feeling empathy for people who might feel that way and understand how they might feel. Another problem with this classic Thanksgiving scene of people going around the table saying what they're thankful for is that a lot of the stuff they say always feels fake, or at least to me it has. A lot of the people aren't truly thankful for what they're just saying something because somebody told them to say something. If you're only thankful for something because you were told you should be, is that true thankfulness? Essentially what I'm asking is, can you fake it until you make it when it comes to thankfulness? As I was trying to figure out why I had this issue with giving a sermon on thankfulness, I realized that anxiety of situations like that was a small part of it. And feeling like people are often not being honest about whether they're being about thankfulness, they're often stretching the truth, was a bigger part of it. But there was one more thing that is making me feel that way, and that was several times in my life, I was made to feel like being thankful was a punishment. So let me explain. There'd be situations, either growing up like my parents, or in discipleship situations like Bible college, or when I was doing missions, or other times where I'm being discipled and mentored by somebody, where maybe I didn't have the best attitude about something. Usually there'd be a situation that I felt was unfair. And I know this may shock a lot of you, but I might have kind of a big mouth. So if there's a situation I felt was unfair, I was going to say something about it. And, my parents and my mentors, they actually had the audacity to call that complaining. Can you believe it? Complaining. I would never. So I would be complaining about something, and someone would suggest that I'm simply not being thankful about my current situation, which was true. And they'd say that instead, I should focus on being more thankful. And to do that, I should write out a gratitude list. I can see now that their intentions were good. They thought if I spent time reflecting on things I was thankful for, then I would start feeling better and have a better attitude. And so even though their intentions were good, I misunderstood it as a punishment. I internalized that if I say something negative, then I have to be thankful or write out a list of things I'm thankful for as like a punishment for it, which gave me a negative view of thankfulness in general, but especially a negative view of gratitude lists. I started associating verbalizing or writing down things I'm thankful for as a negative thing and something I only had to do if I did something wrong. I also felt that people would say things they were thankful for, then usually not mean it. They were only faking being thankful or saying they were thankful to try to trick themselves or others into believing it. And I really believed that whole fake it until you make it idea was completely wrong and impossible. So rather than viewing it as just focusing on things that I am thankful for, I would view writing the list as writing down a list of things that I should feel thankful for, but really am not. So in the end, what I actually have is just a list of things I feel guilty about, which is not helpful. I didn't think about or know what true thankfulness was. I just saw thankfulness as something people stretch the truth on or as a punishment. So I realized I had two big questions. The first is, what is true thankfulness? And the second question was, can you fake it until you make it with thankfulness? And if not, how do you find true thankfulness? So I know that last question is really two questions in one, but what I wanted to talk about today is true thankfulness and where to find it, which is what the sermon's called. So because I think we all know that we should be thankful, I don't think anyone is really questioning whether or not Christians are meant to be thankful. We have all heard many verses calling us to thankfulness. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, always be joyful, never stop praying, be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. Clearly it states that it's God's will for us to be thankful in all situations. I'm in verse 18, be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will. It's pretty clear. All throughout Psalms we're called to give God thanks. And many different Bible stories we're told to be thankful. I've never heard a Christian say that they didn't think Christians were supposed to be thankful. Clearly we are, but the question is, how do we be thankful? The question of how to do something is usually, if not always, harder than the question of what to do. I mean, even with the church. What do we need to do? Pack up and get ready for the move. That's an easy answer. How do we do that is a very difficult answer. So first, let's look at what true thankfulness is. Take a minute and think about what you've been most thankful for about in your whole life. When did you feel the most thankful? It doesn't have to be something you have right now, but what were you the most thankful for? It could be a noun, which, a person, a place, a thing. It could be an experience. It could be a lesson you learned. It could be anything. I know it can be hard to choose, a top one. So think of like your top 10 things in your life you've been most thankful for, and just pick one that would be in the top 10. As you think about what your thing is, let me tell you mine. The thing I was most thankful for in my life was a bottle of Mountain Dew. It's a pretty small and cheap thing, I know, but of course there's a story to it. So as many of you would know, I used to be a full-time missionary. In the beginning of 2018, I was living in Nepal. I was part of a team doing early research into different languages in Nepal, trying to find a language group to potentially do Bible translation into. For the last few months, we'd been in an area called Dankuta, which is for fun. I gave Todd a picture of it if he wants to throw it. So that's Dankuta, Nepal. It's really cool. I mean, Nepal's mountainous. It's a town on top of a mountain. We were finishing up our projects, and we were scheduled to travel from Dankuta back to the capital city of Kathmandu, and then we'd be there for a few weeks, and from there we'd fly back to our base in Australia. Since we were about to leave, some of the locals we'd been staying with and doing ministry with decided to throw us a going away party. So the locals came over to the church we were staying at, and they cooked us a meal, and they just stayed and visited for a while. And then after our party, they left, and we went to bed. So something important to know about Nepal is they're an extremely poor country. Sickness is very common, and food poisoning is rampant. They don't have the infrastructure in place to filter water and sanitize things like we do in first world countries. One of the other things we got to do while we were there was we actually did some water testing. And so we bought some supposedly filtered water from a reliable, good place to buy water. And even that filtered water we tested had fecal matter in it. So even the clean water that only the rich foreigners could afford had human fecal matter in it. So imagine just, the normal water in Nepal. So food and water poisoning is a huge issue in Nepal. So as I said, we had our going away celebration and we went to bed. Then about 2 a.m, I woke up feeling just about as sick as I'd ever felt in my entire life. I had what felt like less than zero energy. Just being alive seemed like it was taking more energy than I had. I spent the rest of that night trying to sleep and stumbling to the bathroom and back, barely having the energy to make it to the bathroom and back, until around 5 a.m. when the rest of my team started waking up to catch our bus to Kathmandu. I literally had so little energy at that point that I did something I never did before that in my life and haven't done since, which was to text my team leader, who was just in the room next to me, for help. I think I literally just texted, sick, need help, because even texting was exhausting at that point. I didn't think I'd even have the energy to go to the bathroom again, and I knew I definitely didn't have the energy to pack my sleeping bag and other final things into my bag and get it to the bus. So some of my fellow missionaries were able to help me get my stuff packed and walk the few hundred feet to the bus that we were going to take back to Kathmandu. And so now I knew I was looking at a day of not just being the sickest I'd ever been in my life, but also being the sickest I'd been, while also in a hot bus, driving on some of the worst roads in the world. And so as you can see in the photo, there's mountains. Nepal is where Mount Everest is. There's very few flat places in the whole country. I mean, that's flat enough they chose to build a city there, and as you can see, it's not very flat. So basically, imagine being super sick, being in a hot bus, and driving up and down the Beartooth Pass for hours on end, while also having to throw up or have diarrhea every few minutes. So it was a fun day. But after several hours of driving, we stopped for a break at what would be considered a truck stop in Nepal. I also had a picture of that. So it's not an American truck stop. They literally have like falling apart bathrooms. And by the way, they would charge you to use bathrooms like that. That's probably what that sign is saying. I don't speak Nepali, but you'd have to pay to use their falling apart toilets. And occasionally these truck stops would have, food and water and stuff like that too. And so we stopped, and I was able to stumble to the bathroom and back, and I had thrown up on the bus, and I was, super sick and tired and dehydrated, and I knew it would be good to drink something, have some sort of liquid, but I decided I was too exhausted to go looking for something to drink. I'd just get back to the bus and try to survive until we're back in Kathmandu, and then when we got back to Kathmandu, we had much better accommodations, and I could get stuff there. So I was just back in my seat, and then right after I sat down, one of my good friends on my team came walking up, holding an ice-cold bottle of Mountain Dew. And now there's something that people who travel to third world countries a lot know about Pepsi and Coke products. It's kind of amazing. The first is both those brands, Pepsi and Coke, are absolutely everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter how poor the country is, how remote the country is, everywhere has readily available access to Coke and Pepsi. I actually wouldn't be surprised if some research facility in Antarctica has a Coke vending machine, because they are literally everywhere. And the other really cool thing about those companies that everyone who travels a lot knows is they're both big American corporations that are terrified of losing millions in a lawsuit over having dirty water in their products, and they have amazing quality control. So again, anywhere you are, no matter how dirty the country is, how polluted things are, even if you pull it out of a garbage dump somewhere, if you find a sealed container of Coke or Pepsi products, they're going to be clean and safe to drink. Even most bottled waters, you aren't sure because there's so many different water bottling companies. It could be bottled with water from that country that's not clean, but a Coke or Pepsi product is 100% safe to drink all the time, meaning a Mountain Dew would be completely safe for me to drink without risking additional food poisoning. So I pointed at the Mountain Dew my friend had and asked him where he'd found that. And he said, "Oh, over there, they sell them," pointing around the corner. Then he seemed to suddenly remember how sick I was and said, "Oh, do you want me to get you one?" And before I could even say yes, he quickly ran around the corner to buy me one. I'll never forget how good that Mountain Dew made me feel. Partially, it was just being so sick and so dehydrated and having a nice fizzy drink made me feel so much better. And partially being sick, but having a friend willing to help. That moment was, I think, the most thankful I've ever felt. I was so incredibly thankful for my friend for getting me that Mountain Dew, and I'm so incredibly thankful for the Mountain Dew itself, that it actually kind of became part of my personality. To this day, anytime I'm feeling sick, I start craving cold Mountain Dew. Up to that point, I'd hardly ever drank Mountain Dew. I definitely wouldn't say it was one of my favorites before then, and it's still not one of my favorites now, but I definitely drink it way more than I used to. And whenever I'm sick, it's one of the first things I want. So, pro tip, if I'm ever sick and you bring me Mountain Dew, I'll love you forever. But anyway, that level of thankfulness is true thankfulness. I was so thankful for a 50-cent container of Mountain Dew that it literally changed my taste in soda for the rest of my life. I don't think I've had a Mountain Dew since that day without it reminding me of being in a hot bus in the middle of Nepal. So that is true thankfulness. So then the question becomes, how do we find that? And the answer is actually quite simple. We as humans aren't thankful for things we think we deserve. We are only thankful for the things we don't think we deserve, or unexpected things. So, your expectations will control your level of thankfulness. You expect to be able to take your next breath, so you aren't thankful for it. But if you hold your breath, or if you're Richard, you will very quickly become thankful for that next breath that you can take. So, having a clear understanding of what we deserve will help us be thankful. Another example of that is not a single person here thanked me for not punching them when they walked in this morning, because you clearly expected that not to happen. So your expectations control your thankfulness. In the story of Jonah, Jonah praises God and thanks God while he's in the belly of a whale, which doesn't seem like a very thankful place. But why does Jonah praise God when he's there? Jonah understood that he had directly rebelled against God by not going where God clearly told him to go. And Jonah knew the consequences of that were death and torment forever. And he also, as you can see him accepting his consequences when he told the people on the boat to throw him overboard. He knew he should die for what he did, so he was going to die. But Jonah didn't die. He was in a whale, not dead, so he was thanking God. Job had everything he owned taken away. He had his family taken away, and he had his health taken away. Yet Job was still thanking and praising God. Why? Job understood that he, like everyone else, had sinned and deserved death and torment forever. Even some of Job's friends were talking about, what you deserve. And it's clear in the scriptures that Job lived a righteous life, and his friends were thinking he was getting what he got because he stopped living a righteous life and now deserved it. And that just goes to show that they thought if you lived righteously, you deserved all these great things. But Job understood that he was living a righteous life, and it wasn't because of something he did recently, but just because of the state of being that all of us humans are in, of constantly sinning, that he deserves nothing. So Job realized that at least for the moment, he wasn't dead, which meant he should be thankful. So we have all sinned, and we all deserve eternal punishment and death. Yes, Christ did make a way for us to be saved from that, but salvation is only offered because of God's grace. None of us actually deserve it. Something a friend taught me about offense, I think also applies to what we deserve. So my friend taught me that we're dead in Christ. Romans 6:8, and since we died with Christ, we know we will also live with him. In Luke 9:23, then he said to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. So we're dead in Christ. We are to pick up our cross daily. The cross is what we died on, so we are to die to ourselves daily. And so what my friend taught me about offense is that there's an amazing thing about dead people. Do dead people get offended? I mean, you can walk right up to a dead person and just kick them for no reason. And are they going to be offended? No. Absolutely not. They can't be offended because they're dead. And that's how we should be with regards to offense. Someone should be able to walk right up and kick you, and you can't be offended by it because you're dead. And I think with that same train of thought, is a dead person going to expect to be treated a certain way? No, he's dead. He can't expect anything. Dead people don't expect things. So he's not going to care how he's treated. He's not going to expect anything. Now, obviously, we do tend to show respect to the dead, which is a good thing. But the dead person's not going to know or care. He's not going to have any expectations. And that's how we should be. We should be well aware of what we deserve. Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death. We should all be aware that anything beyond that is something we should be thankful for. So yeah, we all deserve death and we all deserve eternal punishment. And so, even if at times you might think death is a better situation than you'd currently be in, it also shows that you miss the fact that what you deserve continues after death as well. We deserve for what happens after we die not to be very great, but because of God's graciousness, we do have something to look forward to. But if you're saying you'd rather be dead than be in a current situation, you kind of missed God's point. True thankfulness is a deep and impactful emotion that we feel when we are truly blessed by something. And we find true thankfulness when we have a clear picture of what we really deserve compared to what we have been given. It's not in my notes, but also just a thought on that, as I've found doing a lot of jail and prison ministry, is people who have been to jail or prison often end up being much more thankful than people who haven't. And again, it comes down to, I think, expectations. If you've never lost everything in your life, it's hard to really picture that and be thankful for the things you do have. Anyway, so I do think it's possible to fake it until you make it with thankfulness. But perhaps rather than just doing a gratitude list, Instead, make a mental list of all the things you have done wrong and all the reasons you don't deserve anything except the consequences of sin. And then reflect on all the things God gave you instead of what you deserve. We're all like Jonah, where we've rebelled against God. We've all, done things that are sin. I mean, some are really obvious. Others, you've still sinned, and it might just be lying or living two lives or not living for Christ or giving things to Christ. Or there's many, many ways people sin, and we know we've all sinned and done things we shouldn't. And so we're going to have one more closing song, and I would invite you to really think about what the song is saying while also reflecting on your life. And so the song does have, choruses that repeat quite a bit, like most songs do. So in those times, take a minute to think about what you've done and to listen to God and hear what God is saying and get an understanding of what you really deserve. But then also reflect on what God gives you instead, and hopefully that'll lead you to praise and thanks for what God's done. And so we've all done horrible things, but God chose to love us